Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today I want to talk about the Canon EOS R5 and the R6 and how they did at last week's wedding. So I did a first impressions video on the R5, and I will definitely be doing a first impressions video on the R6, but I had my first wedding with them last week, and I want to talk about my experience using the R5 and R6 in a wedding environment. If you're familiar with my channel, I am a wedding and portrait photographer based out of Austin, Texas, and for almost the last 2 years, I've shot exclusively with the Canon EOS R and RF glass. I've been completely in love with the system, and I was super excited for the R5 and R6 and the improvements they were bringing to the cameras. I want to really focus on 3 things in this video. I want to focus on autofocusing, image quality, and battery life. Again, in a wedding environment. Let's get started. The new autofocusing system is flat out incredible. I was happy with the EOS R. It wasn't perfect, it was quirky, but I loved it. This autofocusing system is out of this world. Those little quirks I had to deal with the previous R are completely gone, and IAF on this camera works in every freaking environment. It is insane. With the previous camera, I could not get IAF to ever work, for example, in the reception where it was darkly lit, father-daughter dance, the bride and groom dance. IAF never really worked there. Subject tracking did great. IAF didn't. It was okay. It was quirky. Long gone. The R5 and the R6 completely blow everything out the water. It is the best autofocusing system I have ever used. And I think out of the entire wedding, I must have shot almost 4,000 photos. I probably have a handful of photos out of focus. That is absolutely insane. This autofocusing system will not let you down. And as a matter of fact, I think its only quirk, and this happens when the camera's really so good, is when you have a large group of people, the camera will pick up a million eyes. So really kind of getting the camera to focus on one particular subject will require some assistance. This will happen during weddings, and there are some workarounds to get around it. So let's talk about that really quick. One scenario I want to bring up is the bride coming down the aisle. The camera, if you have it just on auto IAF, will pick up eyes on the closest subject, which means if there's people to the left, people to the right, which there is, it will pick up those eyes versus the bride down the aisle. This is one of those things where you really have to know your equipment and how it works. So usually for those environments, I switch to the vertical AF zone. So I'm telling the camera to only focus in the vertical zone in the middle. That way it always picks up either the bride or the father as they're walking down the aisle. Those little workarounds you will figure out as you use these cameras throughout the wedding. But overall, the autofocusing system in the R5 and R6 is flat out amazing. The cameras are practically identical, so let me go ahead and get that out the way. The only difference is the image sensor, the mode dial on the top, and the media it records in. Other than that, the menus, the buttons, ergonomics are practically identical. So having both cameras is extremely easy because you don't feel like you're using 2 different cameras. Image quality. Image quality is phenomenal. Again, if you're coming from the EOS R, don't expect a huge difference. If you're exposing properly or if you're shooting in lower ISOs, these cameras are so good that they're almost going to look identical. I think where you really get the difference with these new cameras is better ISO performance and, more importantly, dynamic range. These cameras, you can underexpose 2 to 3 stops comfortably and recover everything in the shadows. What's interesting is, on the flip side, the highlight recovery on this camera is not the greatest. The R has better highlight recovery, and I'll do a separate video on that later, but that tells me that these cameras perform better if they're underexposed. So you really want to make sure you're not clipping anything, because if it's in the shadows, again, 2 to 3 stops you can comfortably recover. If you clip something, the highlight recovery is not the greatest. So keep that in mind. And that's where the newer sensors really outperform older sensors. It's not necessarily shooting in ideal conditions with ISO 100 because all the images will look the same. It's shooting in tough scenarios where you have to either underexpose or you have to shoot at a higher ISO where these newer sensors perform better. And overall, I'm extremely happy with the R5 and R6. Is there a difference in image quality? There's a difference in megapixels, right? You can definitely crop and zoom in more on the R5 and retain the detail. But as far as dynamic range and high ISO, these cameras performed very similarly. I wouldn't be concerned if you're thinking the R6 has 20 megapixels, that it's not enough. It is absolutely enough. And you gotta remember, this is the exact same sensor that Canon uses on the 1DX Mark III, and that sensor has enough megapixels for everything, right? So don't think about the megapixels too much. This camera is actually probably the sweet spot for wedding photographers because the file sizes are manageable, the dynamic range is great, and you still have that killer autofocus. But again, I'm kind of getting off subject. We'll talk about that in another video. Let's talk about battery life. Based on my limited time with the R5, I imagined the battery life was going to be a problem during weddings. I was very surprised. I shot a 7.5 hour wedding with the R5 and R6, and I made it throughout the whole wedding with one battery in each camera. I even took a picture with my iPhone. Let me put the pictures up here to show you exactly how many shots I've taken with each battery in those 7.5 hours. Now, when I mention 7.5 hour wedding, I am including a dinner. Usually I take a 30-minute break during dinner. I eat, I turn off my cameras, I recharge. So the cameras were pretty much working for 7 hours and I made it through with one battery. Normally I shoot with a battery grip. I didn't get my hands on one before this wedding, so I shot without it and one battery was fine. So I don't think battery life's an issue. If you think about it, I used 2 cameras and I drained pretty much the battery on both. So if you're only shooting with one, I definitely recommend picking up 2 to 3 batteries to be on the safe side for an entire wedding day. But overall, these cameras are a joy to shoot with. It makes the wedding day significantly easier because you don't have to worry about, is my shot in focus? You don't have to worry about fighting the autofocusing system. You don't have to worry about battery life. You don't have to worry about so many things that you can really just focus on being in the moment and capturing what's happening in front of you. And that's what these cameras are all about. You don't want to be fiddling in a wedding with your settings and changing your autofocusing. You want to be in the moment. You want to be able to capture what's happening in front of you. And with these new tools, there is no excuse on why you missed a moment or couldn't capture a memory. Overall, my first impressions, just with one wedding, I am extremely happy with the R5 and R6. I have to note, because I know it's going to be a question in the comments, no, these cameras did not overheat, and no, I never got a warning that the cameras were hot. I shot this wedding in Houston, Texas. It was 90 degrees outside. Not once did I get any issues with the cameras overheating or the overheating symbol or sign on the cameras. So putting that out there. To wrap up this video, this is my first impressions. I do have 3 more weddings this year. Obviously, COVID has just thrown off my entire schedule, just like every other photographer. So I will probably be doing my review on these cameras in the next 60 days. I want to make sure I do another wedding and at least get 10,000 images on each body before I'm able to comfortably give my review from a wedding photographer's perspective. But overall, hopefully you like this first impressions. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. Like I mentioned, I will be doing a first impressions on the R6 later this week, and I can't wait to share all the content. As always, guys, please like this video, please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one. Peace.